So Joyce Meyer's stance on this was not that there are these different personality types. I mean, we could label, somebody maybe has a bad temper. We say, well, they've got a so-and-so personality type. But Joyce Meyer's stance was that if you've got it, you're stuck with it.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't even refer to it as stuck with it. She didn't look at it as a bad thing. Was my interpretation of what she was saying. I knew that was wrong. The question came to my mind, and it was a sincere question. I maybe don't know much about the Word of God now, but I knew a lot less then. And my thought was, did Jesus ever talk about people's personalities? Did he ever address personality types? And I can't find any evidence of that in the Word of God. So the point is, whatever our personality types are, they need to be taken to the cross.
Right.
Our personality needs to be changed from this old sin nature, this old human nature, and we need a godly personality given to us, which the Lord will give to us. So much so that our personalities don't even matter anymore. People don't see our personalities. They see Christ in us. And that's what we should strive for as believers. Right. And that's all through the cross.
Exactly.
So that was my first indication of this one particular lady, that I couldn't continue to listen to her because we weren't really... I don't want to say we weren't believing in the same Jesus, because if I say that, then I'm essentially saying that, that she's not preaching the gospel at all. I don't want to take it that far, but she had a whole different idea of what the Christian life was supposed to be about, what was to be expected, and I had to turn that off. And I could name more people and more doctrines and things they discussed, and probably will in a moment. But she was also one of the ones. And again, we don't want to talk about personality so much, but you noticed some other things there that became issues for you, and you said, I can't continue to listen to these particular things.
Right.
And some of it involved finances, I think. There was a little bit of an arrogance there about, if we're... And you find
she's
this,
part of the prosperity
gospel. I was
gospel.
going to say, you find this in a lot of the Word of Faith, and Charismatic teaches that if you have enough faith, then you
can name what you want
and
get it.
You name what you want, you name it and claim it. And that goes to the Jesus died spiritually doctrine, which we'll try to get to in a little bit. You can have what you want. You have what you say. There's Charles Capps, I believe it was, wrote a little booklet called that. You can have what you say. And again, it makes a God out of man.
Right.
Because God is the only one I have ever known who has spoken things into existence.
Right.
But the booklet basically says we can do the same thing.
Right.
And then we've got preachers telling people that if you drive a moped, just don't even come to our church.
Right.
Or if you don't drive the newest model car, don't put our church bumper sticker on your car because that's embarrassing to us.
Right.
I've said before when I've brought that up in messages, I think somebody who is willing to get on a moped and go to church, that says a lot for them.
It does.
And if they're faithful with their giving their tithe, and God has something better for them as far as transportation than a moped, God can get it to them.
Right.
But in the meantime, whatever the reason is they're riding a moped, they're probably thanking God for that moped instead of having to walk. And we ought to rejoice with them for where they are in their degree of prosperity. So there can be sort of an arrogance there that comes out where we look down our noses at other people because maybe they don't have what we have or whatever. And I think I know my own heart well enough I can say this. I hope I'm telling it right, that I'm glad for anybody that's been blessed in whatever way.
Right.
I mean, if they've got so much more money than I do, or a bigger home in a nicer neighborhood, and keep a brand new car every year, that's wonderful.
Yes.
The only problem that comes in is if they begin to make a God out of those things,
right.
if that becomes the priority. And I'm afraid that the material blessings have become the priority in a lot of this teaching that we're referring to, rather than the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Well, that's what you hear them talk about the most.
Whatever you talk about the most is where your heart is the way I look at it. And they talk about the material things and how Christians are supposed to have everything. And you heard a local pastor on TV say a couple of years ago that the Christians ought to be owning the shopping malls and the banks and so forth. And if a Christian does own a bank or a shopping mall, that's not sin. That's fine if their relationship is right with God. And God does make millionaires out of some believers.
Right.
And I just pray they're paying tithe on that. And supporting the work of God with it. If He's blessed them that way, then He certainly He intends for all of us to do that, whether we have little or much by the world standards. But so the greed gospel
Right.
as some people refer to it, is another one of the things that's in the church that it takes away from the work of the cross, because it puts our material possessions ahead of these spiritual blessings that we're supposed to have. Now, let me say this at the same time, though. Whatever you need financially or material, Jesus paid for it at the cross.
He did.
Your blessing, financially, materially, your prosperity, it's in the cross.
Right.
But you need to be saved first. You need to be living a sanctified life, and that should never be your priority, is to see how many material blessings you can amass here on this earth.
Right.
Because you're not going to take it with you. You lay up treasures in heaven, not here on earth. So it depends on the way we look at it and what we do with what God blesses us with. We can take God's blessing and turn it into something bad if we're not careful.
Right. I was going to say, basically this prosperity gospel and the name it, claim it, all that, it basically boils down to the little God doctrine. And, a lot of the preachers who preach the prosperity, maybe all of them, but I won't say that for sure, but a lot of them do believe that we become little gods. Yeah. And I wish I had my notes in front of me of all the different people and what they exactly.
The first one that comes to my mind is Paul Crouch, the head of TBN. He's talked about, he said, I am a little God, or I am a little Jesus, or something to that effect.
Right.
I'm not quoting him verbatim, but it's easy to find on the internet the quotes out there. And then all the people that he has on the network, many of them agree with that philosophy.
And I can't remember the one who said something about when he reads that where God says.
That's Kenneth Copeland. When God says I am, he just says I am too.
Yes. So
that is blasphemy.
Right.
That is blasphemy.
Right. It's this idea. And unfortunately, what it is bringing God down and lifting us up. If we're little gods, then we're right there on the same level as God, and that's entirely not true. But the bad thing, I mean that's completely bad, but the thing is that people don't realize is that that's also New Age.
Yes, it is.
New Age believes that God is in everything, therefore everything is God.
Yeah.
Everything's God.
If you believe that God is in everything, then you come back around to the rest of that sentence, that conclusion, that everything's God.
Let me throw in this. It's totally ridiculous to think everything is God. And of course, I could just think, how stupid can you get? Well, I listened to a preacher one time on the internet. He had his church services on the internet, and I listened to one of his messages. It was a newer church. I wanted to hear what kind of messages were coming from his pulpit. And it just so happened this was probably the first one I pulled up. And he said in it that God was in everything. And he said, and I can't remember the exact quote, but I promise you this is what he said. He said that the chair you're sitting on is God.
Yeah. He said, you think you're sitting on metal and foam and rubber, or whatever the chair's made out of. He said, but that's God. He said, you're sitting on God.
Yeah.
And that's blasphemy too.
And we played, I had saved that clip and we played it at our church and had to let the whole congregation hear him say that, because I was shocked. Of course when you say, God's in everything, of course you're going to come to that reasoning that, a chair would be God. But to actually hear a preacher, someone who claims to be a preacher of the gospel, get up and tell his congregation that the chair is God.
Yeah,
how ridiculous.
It's a sad day for the church. It is.
Yes. But that's what it boils down to when they start getting into this idea of God being in everything, therefore we're gods, therefore your chair is God, therefore the recliner you're sitting in right now, if you're sitting in a recliner, it's God. How? It's nonsense. It's complete nonsense to say anything like that, and it's blasphemy. And I remember when we played that in our congregation at church, I remember it was complete. You could hear a pin drop and everybody was just shocked. And it was like stunned looks on people's faces because they couldn't believe that someone would say that. But, that's the kind of doctrine that's out there. Yeah. That's the kind of doctrine. That's the kind of things that you get into things that's just plain out stupid when you get away from the cross.
Yeah, that's exactly that's what it boils down to. If you get away from the cross, I don't care how long you've been saved, if you are saved, you get away from the cross, you'll fall for anything.
Right.